Ladies and gentlemen, our event this evening, the CEO's Forum, serves as a platform for business leaders like yourselves to come together to share thoughts and ideas on the latest business trends and how they impact HR practices. Our theme for our forum this evening is People First Culture, inspired by CEOs. We're delighted to see such a diverse group of people joining us. We have over 100 business leaders in the audience here today, representing industries such as education, banking, finance and insurance, IT. We have apparel and textile, manufacturing, FMCG, food, beverage, travel, automobile, health, agriculture, retail, telecommunication. That's a comprehensive list right there. And I'm sure you all agree, ladies and gentlemen, that with such a wide cross-section of sectors being represented in the audience, no matter what industry we belong to, at our organizations, our human resources are the most important driving force behind our business success. So we thank all of you, our valued business leaders, for your commitment towards enriching your human resources and HR practices. And we thank you, of course, for joining us here today for what we believe will be an insightful and educational evening ahead. To now officially do the honors of the welcome address, please join me now in welcoming on stage the President of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management, Sri Lanka. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Mr. Ken Vijayakumar.
It gives me great pleasure to warmly welcome you all to the CIPM CEO Forum, People First Culture, inspired by CEOs. Indeed, I am very humbled to note there are more than 120 CEOs who have accepted our invitation to attend this August assembly. Challenges of the COVID-19 have made all of us to understand the immense contribution made by the HR professionals, from workforce protection to business stability and continuity. As you all are aware, the HR professionals' commitment was huge. They were, managing the vaccination, to managing isolation centers, to sending food and work tools, other relief to their houses, individual houses, taking care of well-being of employees, the families, etc. So this huge attitude and mind shift of HR professionals made CEOs and board members aware the HR capability in managing the business risk and the business continuity efficiently. According to the Forbes magazine recent survey, the good news is 89% of the CEOs say HR should have a central role in the business, according to the new data from Accenture. The bad news is only 45% of the CEOs say they are creating conditions for HR to lead the business growth successfully. So the condition should improve for the HR professionals in Sri Lanka. Why CHROs are more suitable for the CEO's role? The chief HR officers are often able to take on CEO's roles because they are already familiar with the inner workings of the company. They know the culture, the values, they have good business acumen to understand the importance of employee satisfaction as a competitive advantage. At CIPM Council, we groom future leaders for CEOs by giving the true boardroom experience. As you all know, Samitha Perera, today the panelist, is a living example, who was as our past president, and the experience he gained at CIPM surely added value to become a CEO. The new role for HR leaders, the true partners to the CEO, and an HR leader can make CEO, as you all agree with me, hero or a zero. So HR professional should look by CEO with a similar importance as the corporate finance, as a HR leader should be the true partner to the CEO. They should help CEO build, assign talent in order to fully execute on company strategies, managing people just as managing finances. By having clear understanding of the company core values and culture, the HR leaders can ensure well portrayed by employees. In addition, they need to be an exemplary leader, have strong business acumen, communication skill, and have a sound understanding of business strategy. So currently at CIPM, we give this expertise for for the future HR leaders to grow, and we have included these competencies in our curriculum. If the HR leaders are too busy in dealing with administrative tasks, may not have a deep understanding to the business, it is the CEO that needs to ensure they remove and prevent barriers for HR leaders in order to become a true strategic business partners that untap the full potential of the company and its people. The CEO needs to have clear expectations and ensure they share an understanding with the HR leader of desired outcomes. The objective to have the HR leader to drive similar value as CFO, then playing the support role, the HR leader should be involved in key decisions as opposed to implementing decisions that are already made. The business will benefit from better management that considers human factors and implications. So what you should look when you're hiring the HR leader in the future? He or she should be a strategic partner who has a clear understanding of the business. So HR is no more a supporting role, but he or she has to get involved in the business. And HR people should be able to make data-driven decisions, and they should be pay more attention to analytics and to give the trend and the support to the CEO. Ability to diagnose problems. So the HR leaders has to be more proactive before a problem comes to them. They need to keep the CEO informed and not to go with a problem, but to go with a decision to implement this. We can get rid of the business. Get the business risk covered. Also, the HR people should have the marketing mindset. So what they should do is they have to drive the employer branding and to increase the employee value proposition, which is important in a competitive market for your recruitment and for your hiring. HR also should be good at storytelling. It is very, very important, and to convince employees during the times of difficulties and, to convince them, to talk about the company, where are they taking them. So it's very, very important. Also the leadership, it goes without saying. And ability to engage, as we have seen during COVID period, how HR people got engaged with the employees who were, isolated at home. Even you may be aware, they were doing online engagement, employee engagement. There are online parties were happening. The food were delivered, and everybody saying, celebrating together. So employee engagement is very, very important. Otherwise, employees are disengaged means less productivity. They are not connected with the organization. I'm sure all the CEOs who are present here already grooming their CHROs and their head of HR to be their successors. Finally, I would like to thank all of you having present here today, and also like to thank our project chairperson, my vice president, Mr. Priyanth, and his committee, and also the HODs of CEOs, especially the contribution made by Ms. Himali Dasanayaka and their team for the immense support. If not for their contribution, this event wouldn't have been possible. So I wish you all the best in the future, and again, thank you for your presence, and we look forward to a fruitful panel discussion. Thank you.
Mr. Bingumal Thewarathanthri, better known as Bingu, is the Chief Executive Officer of Standard Chartered Bank Sri Lanka. He is the first Sri Lankan national to be appointed to this position. Apart from his role as CEO, Bingu also heads Sri Lanka's commercial, corporate, and institutional banking business. With that introduction, ladies and gentlemen, it's now our pleasure to invite our keynote speaker to share his message with us this evening. So with your applause, ladies and gentlemen, please join me now in welcoming on stage Mr. Bingumal Thewarathanthri.
I'm going to talk a bit about Standard Chartered. Of course, I'm from a global organization running a banking business in Sri Lanka. So globally, we work in about 59, close to 60 markets, more than 85,000 employees. We got about 120 nationalities. We speak 170 languages. So it's truly diversified across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. So we have a fair amount of data gathered among us in our HR fraternity. Yearly, we do a lot of research in terms of what people are looking for, what people, basically think about the current and the future. So one important couple of other facts about the Sri Lanka's franchise. Interestingly, I also learned because I always thought my millennial percentage is about 60%. To see it's gone up to 70 when I check the numbers. Millennials and Gen Zs are hovering around 80% in Standard Chartered Bank Sri Lanka. So that's a huge change for us. Even in the management committee, we have good 4 or 5 millennials in the management committee. 51%, 49% gender diversity, and 40% women leadership in the management team. Second level, I would say around 50-50. So we are very clear understanding about especially the new generation and what they're looking at. So according to our data, a couple of emerging trends. People are eternally looking at flexible working. People are eternally looking at human leadership, authentic leadership, and a purpose-first kind of a strategy. So they, unlike when we joined the bank, we were asked to run and we ran. So we never asked what the purpose was. We had no clue about the profitability, what we were doing. CSR, of course, we got involved. But today the youngsters are asking, what are you ultimately, what are you doing? Forget about your fair shareholder returns, but what are you doing to society? So Stanchart had to come up with a net zero agenda. When we did the research, people said you have to participate better in the economies. We have something called the lifting participation, supporting women-led businesses. So net zero is a big agenda. Another one is resetting globalization because the world is changing, the supply chain is changing. So they now look at, are you really buying from emerging markets? Are you paying the right price? Do you have the right governance? So these are kind of, this is global strategy, and we're now taken it from the people and put it right on top and driving as a corporate strategy. And constantly people asking, especially I'm talking about millennials and Gen Zs, the reality is this generation is now larger than us in the workforce, right? We have to agree. You can be 50, you can be 70, but every company that you represent today, you have more than 60%, I'm 100% sure more than 60% Gen Zs and millennials, mainly millennials and the Gen Zs, right? So they're constantly asking, am I adding value? So it's not about titles anymore. Am I adding value? Do I see myself growing as a result of adding value to the organization? Am I respected enough? Do you understand me better? The other one is, am I getting paid enough for the work that I do? So I know in the HR world, this pay would be the fourth or the third or the fourth or sometimes the fifth priority. They say, no, it's culture, it's purpose, it's this, it's that. But today I'm going to talk about pay a little bit because I thought it's very timely with the taxes going up to 36% and the inflation 50%. I thought I'll touch on that. But what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about what we have done in terms of, because today's topic is people first, culture. What Sri Lanka has done, SCB Sri Lanka specifically had done in the last 3 years. So I will not dwell too much into the pandemic because I think all of us did, something or the other during the pandemic. So we also had, our offices closing down, but we are an essential service. We had to open our offices. We had to bring some people to the office, whether we like or not. So we had a skeleton staff come into the office. Fortunately, we had buses. We had buses from the early 2000 because of the war. So we had buses. There was a management decision to actually remove the buses because the war came to an end in 2009. But we, at that time in 2012, 2013, we took a decision to keep the buses. So it was subsidized transport. We always had it. We just activated that. People came to work. Now, still people said, you know what, I got old parents and all that. What do we do? So I think we are one of the few organizations paid an extra allowance, risk allowance for people to come to work, for the skeleton staff, right? Then after that, there was a lockdown. Then we opened the economy. Then we closed again. So there were ups and downs. But a lot of things were done in terms of booking hotels to increase in the insurance or things like that during that time. I will not dwell too much about it. But during last year, I think early last year, world came out of the pandemic, but Sri Lanka got into a different crisis. We got into economic crisis. Now, when economic crisis happens, I'm sure you all understand as HR professionals, your life first and then your family. That's your number one priority. Forget your career, your promotion, what you do next and all of that. So money becomes very important. And your safety becomes very important. Now, we have a lot of experience in this space because we have handled these situations in places like Nigeria. Of course, Zimbabwe, we managed Zimbabwe for a good 15 years with the crisis. There was a time that we actually stopped paying salary because inflation was going up. to a level where you pay like a couple of million, at that time Zimbabwe dollars, couple of $1 million for a loaf of bread. In the morning it's 2 million, in the evening it's 5 million. To that level, inflation was going up. So the inflation that you have seen is nothing compared to hyperinflation. I've seen some people quoting Sri Lanka or say, oh, Sri Lanka is in hyperinflation, nothing like that, right? So we had to stop paying salaries and we actually started giving them rations. We paid school fees directly from South Africa to those schools. So we had experience in that space. So we kind of replicated some of those things. Of course, we didn't have that level of inflation, but we realized that people are in queues to make sure they have some petrol for an emergency. Coming to work is not a priority. Again, we activated working from home because working from home was started during the pandemic. Even before that, we had flexi working, but it was at a very low scale. So we went on to full-on working from home with all the support and all of that. Then the power crisis, we bought UPSs for all staff, not for only the senior staff, for important staff, for all staff UPSs. Laptops were given for 95%, I would say, but there was a core team that had to come to work. They have to come to work. Dongles, wingers given to everybody, whatever they want with the data package. It was done during the pandemic. So infrastructure was ready. So we activated that process again. And fortunately, our bus service, the person who provided the buses actually had a petrol shed. So he was also supplying to working for Sri Lankan Airlines. He was somewhat an essential sector. So we didn't have a problem from that perspective. Of course, the bank's generators got some diesel from IOC. By the way, IOC is also one of my large clients. So we have put a process in place and people's first strategy for SCB, I think in Sri Lanka started with that crisis. Well, maybe a little bit during the pandemic, but during the crisis, we really thought, because in a crisis like that, your personal well-being, your family becomes the number one priority. It's very important. No matter what you say, even if you tell the guy you're firing, he might first look after the family. So that, I think the management committee also came forward and we all accepted, agreed. And so the other thing is inflation. Now, inflation, that's where the pay come into play. Now, inflation picked up with the devaluation. I'm sure you remember in last year, April, we devalued the currency. It was an accident or planned. It was capped for a good 1.5 years and suddenly we floated it. We said all the time, do it in a methodical manner, but free float is a free fall. So we went up to 80% depreciation within a month. Inflation picked up from that day. Of course, we also done a lot of money printing, so that also helped the inflation. So the cost of living went up. Petrol was doubled and everything kind of went up. So I think we are, again, one of the organizations where we thought we were going to do an inflation adjustment. Again, it was easy for us because Zimbabwe, we've done many of these stuff. We have a few other African markets as well. We done these adjustments. So when we first spoke to the group also, they said, don't agree on an amount because this thing can go up to 100% inflation. So don't agree on a percentage. But I'm proud to say that we paid our people every quarter more than a salary. Every quarter, starting from April. Okay. Now these are big decisions. One can say, oh, international bank, you have the money. Right? You can check my profits. So our profits are probably the lowest from a year-on-year perspective. Our profits came down drastically because we have huge exposure to the governments in terms of our liquidities with central bank, and today Sri Lanka is a default entity. There was a huge ECL, expected credit loss. So we go by the rule, and my ECL values are, I think, much larger than any other bank in the country, right? $40–50 million to that level. So as a result of that, if you look at SCB, Sri Lanka, final numbers will be on the papers. The profitability standpoint year-on-year, it really came down to a drastic level. But my point was, like, you have to keep the franchise going. And if you lose the people, you lose the franchise. So that was the thing, and there was a lot of support from the region as well. Because I sometimes get, when I'm in multiple forums in the business sector, we talk about inflation, salaries, and all of that. Sadly, so don't get me wrong, some companies have done something. There's some allowance given to manage this situation. Some have done more than the others. I know one company that had done 80% increment, right? The one company in Sri Lanka done 80% because of that devaluation. But the reality is, I've also seen companies, publishing saying, oh, 60% year-on-year profits, right? So this was done, especially during COVID. During COVID, this country, top 200 companies, everybody made money. Everybody. Nobody crashed, right? But very little translated into people when it comes to 2022. 2021, everybody made money. Go and check the numbers, right? Unless you had a very serious, unique issue. I've not seen any company recording losses in this country during the pandemic. top companies became bigger and bigger. It's very good to have the top corporates doing well. But did you translate that to people? We talk about people first and we say salary is the last thing, fourth thing. It's not a big thing, We have a Christmas party, we have this and we have that. Gone are the days where people, look at all these fringe benefits. Of course, fringe benefits can play a role. But gone are the days where people, put salary as the fourth or the fifth priority because the whole world is in a stress situation right now. If you look at markets like Australia, the mortgage, the installments have gone up by 100%. So a lot of people now jump ship and go to Australia, talk to those guys. They're all struggling to pay their mortgage. They're leaving their houses. They're selling one property, trying to restructure and manage. So there's a lot of stress. But in those countries, unfortunately, the whole increment process is very different. Of course, they get global salaries. Their minimum salaries are $60,000. But those people are also really struggling. But here, the companies had some amount of buffer, in my view, some of the companies, but I've not seen all the companies translating that to people. So in a crisis, I thought that was a bit unfair. So that's one point I would like to park with you. And especially for the HR folks here, I think HR also try to sometimes act like cost leaders. I've seen that in many times. HR likes to say, oh, I manage a salary bill with X amount of money, sir. Now, the bottom line will be good. So that's not a way to grow a company, right? You grow top line. You be productive, right? Sometimes we really get stuck in local companies because you build a lot of infrastructure. I've seen some of the companies, they have a big office for the CEO, another big office for the deputy CEO, then big offices for all the management personnel, all sorts of senior managers and chief managers, everybody got an office. The success of a company in this country is, measured by looking at the building of the company, the headquarters and all of that. It's very sad, right? Today, even if you look at Standard Chartered, we are on rent in Singapore, right? We are a pretty large company, DC, global DC, we are on rent in Singapore. We pay rent in Hong Kong. Owning properties doesn't make sense. So, but Sri Lanka has this practice of, expanding by buying assets and, asset heavy, not capital attractive. If you look at the business models, not capital light. So we promote a capital light business model. You don't put pressure on the promoters, but you be lean. The other problem we have is we have like 12 grades in a company or 15 grades. You start as if you take the banking industry, the banking assistant, senior banking assistant, officer, senior officer, junior executive, senior executive, then comes executive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then manager 1, 2, 3, 4, it goes on like that, just imagine. So you keep on giving these little promotions, people are happy, you get 15, 10% increment sometimes. So people think that they're growing up in career, taking additional responsibility, actually you're not. You're wasting time. So that's another thing I've seen, the structures, I'm going to be blunt today, I'm sorry, but these structures are very hierarchical. And you have all the bosses, again, the pay mix is also bad. You have the top management getting paid at a certain level, then there's huge gap in the middle management and there's another gap to the lower end. Lower end, you can go a bit slow because they are slow levers and all that, but middle management, when you come to a 35, 40 level, you need money. So that's why our talent is migrating. Of course, they have a huge problem about the future of the country. They doubt the future of the country. That's one big element. But people are also going because they can't, manage their families with what we pay. So if you're making bottom line, my humble ask is take a look at your salary cost. Salary cost as a percentage of total cost. Salary cost as a percentage of turnover. Take a look at all of that. The other problem we have in the local companies, I would see, many, some multinationals also, we have a lot of people for the same job. So as a result of that, your cost structure is very high. You have thousands of people. If you give a 5% increment, your cost goes up. So we should learn to be lean. That's a very typical Sri Lankan problem again. Government is a classic example of that, 1.7 million people. Private sector is also not that bad. We have seen some companies with 500,000 for small businesses making $2-3 billion rupees of profits, but huge stuff, no automation. So that's something I think we should all take home and think about. Then if you have the right set of people, you can then pay more for those people. I'm not asking you to pay global salaries, but pay reasonable salaries. Because I've compared Sri Lankan salaries with the salaries in Tanzania. I worked there, still we are low. There was a time we were lower than Zimbabwe, trust me. Right? I'm talking about the banking industry now. So these are very controversial statements, but I've seen in my eyes. So some work to do on that space. The other point that there are 4 or 5 themes that I spoke about, but the other point that I would like to touch is like, the flexible working. Now, we all got into flexible working because we were forced to do that. Pandemic came to an end, please come back to work. Now, there are industries like Samitha is looking at me, the manufacturing industry, you can't work from home. The machines in the office, the general managers have to be in office, the supervisors have to be in the factories, so you move around. MAs, branding, you can't work from home. Maybe the corporate office. Interesting thing, when Elon Musk was really tired last year, June, he said, everybody come back to work or resign. Then his management team says, all the Fortune 500 companies are, working from home. He asked a question, have they produced anything good in the last 3 years? So his management team couldn't answer. So Elon called everybody back to office. That's one extreme example. But over 70% of the US firms got some kind of a hybrid working arrangement, and people are moving to those companies. Now in Sri Lanka, because 95% of the companies called everybody back to office, probably the 4-5% will enjoy that workforce joining them. You might not see stress, but your people will be very tired. And when they leave the country and go to a place like Australia or Canada, suddenly they get flexible working. They're like, oh, wow. So they actually enjoy the corporate culture, not the country. They enjoy the flexibility given to you. The biggest paranoia we have is the leadership, the productivity paranoia we have. I think there was a research done by Microsoft. They checked on this whole productivity thing with the line managers and the employees. And the line managers, 90% of the line managers said the productivity is very low when they work from home. 85% of the employees said we are very productive. So there's a big debate going on still, right? Half of this room will say, I've called everybody back to office. I don't believe in this working from home. I heard things like people saying, oh, you can't do that in Sri Lanka. The Sri Lankans don't know how to behave. That's absolute myth, let me tell you that. I've seen the OECD Fortune 500 people working from home. Suddenly they forget they're working from home. They get into the pool. They put something on Facebook. I've seen those Westerners, right? Not only our people. So don't think our people are bad. I think you should have better ways of monitoring people if they're working from home. And larger part of this group, if you're not into manufacturing, can let people work from home. Now, once you give the flexibility to a parent or if you're a caregiver, the freedom that they get to continue their life as it is huge. They automatically build up loyalty. Automatically, they give their 100%. People, when they work from home, all of you have done working from home. You work for 10, 12 hours. You don't stop. That's another bad thing. So you don't stop at 5. Some people switch off at 4:35. They do some work, do some homework, and come back and work from 7 to 9. So tapping into productivity, looking at who's doing what is not a difficult task these days. I would request you to take a look at least some. The other problem is now, some people say, oh, that department is working from home, we come to work every day. Now, that's another problem that you all face when you start this flexible working. But you have to have some method to the madness. So we are still on a hybrid, Standard Chartered Bank Sri Lanka. Globally, 30 of our markets are on hybrid. We are formally going into hybrid future work now, we call it FWN, in April. We are paying an allowance to buy the equipment. Equipment is the table, whatever you want to buy. We are paying $500, $700 for every employee. But it's a mutual decision. It's not like we are forcing on people to work from home. And if somebody has a problem of working from home, they can always come back to office. A lot of our offices are given up space. Now, fortunately, unfortunately, I inherit a building in Fort, so I can't do much with that. But happy to rent it out. But I looked at the option of renting it out, and the profit. The return on that is very low. Actually, it doesn't make sense. So we might keep the whole building, but we are giving the option for people to work from home. Now, the other thing I would like to touch is those are two main things that talk about pay and flexibility. The governance around the people management process in this country. Right now, you guys are up there, top notch, all good. But there's a 50% of the workforce, I think, work for the SMEs. They also, account to like 50% of the GDP. Now, that sector, some people are very good. Don't get me wrong. They pay well. They pay the EPF, bonuses, everything prim and proper. But there's a larger community running people on contracts. So no EPF being paid. Nobody's talking about it. So these are serious governance issues for Sri Lanka. So we have to seriously look at the whole labor reform process in Sri Lanka. in terms of retirement, even in the private sector, we see a serious problem. After 65, you take EPF and gratuity home. After a couple of years, you're very poor, unless you work till you die. That's the reality in this country. A lot of the countries also, you see that problem now in places like Canada, also people work till 70, 80 because the pension is not enough. But here, you just get a lump sum as private sector employees. There's no process of you move companies, but there's a contributory pension traveling with you. There's nothing like that. In a lot of the OECD countries, you have that. Some of the old companies like Standard Chartered, Unilever, I think John Keel, Ceylon Tobacco, they had an old pension process. Now it's all gone. I think we all got together and killed that whole thing and celebrated at some point and say, oh, no more pension, my God. Because the pension guys didn't leave the company. So they waited till 55. Even if you don't perform, my God, they stay. The other problem is in this country, you can't fire anybody. So as a set of professionals, what have we done about it? We talk about it every day, but our labor rules are like really, really tough. So you can actually absolutely not perform, do something, no conduct issues, good citizen, sit and do something and wait for 20 years without any problem. And you have to live with that problem. If that happens at a senior level, you're dead. So these are some serious policy issues that we have to address. When you talk to the investors, like they're very worried about our labor policies. Because if you scale down, you should be able to get rid of people. Of course, you can put a process around it, warn, give warning, 18 months, 1 year, whatever. But there should be a process. It can't be the Thewa process. It can't be the current process. So what we do in the Sri Lankan setup, we transfer people around, we put somebody on top of them, we depress the guy, and he leaves finally. Sometimes they decide to stay. Good luck. So that's a reform that we all look forward for, because if you're looking at, because this week is a very good week because we just got the IMF money as bankers. We are very, very happy. But we will not come out of this if we don't do the reforms. FDIs will not come. So labor reforms have to happen. One, on the employee side, we had to look at the employee well-being. What are we doing about it? What do we do at retirement? What do they do at retirement? The retirement benefits are very, very weak in this country. On the other side, they can also, the retirement, weak in the country. On the other hand, we can't you get rid of people. So those are two things that we have to fix. One last thing, we also outsource our services. So when you outsource, please look at what you do and how they treat those vendors, how they treat your people, because they're your people. They greet your clients, your security guard, all of those guys, the T-boys and T-girls. I've noticed in those companies, they don't pay EPF sometimes. They accumulate and pay. Sometimes you realize they have not paid. So all sorts of crazy arrangements. But as large companies, we prefer to outsource it and sit and wait. But they're your people. So those extended arrangements, outsourcing, you have to be very careful because they drive the culture. So in some organizations, that's a large pool. Call centers and all that I've seen, collection centers, outsource people. They're part of the culture. So it's very important that you review those arrangements constantly, because I've seen areas where people are not paid EPF for those people. So people first, not only at the leadership, not at the middle level, not only at the bottom, to your extended relationships, your suppliers, your buyers, your outsource arrangements, etc. One last thing, end of the day, we are here to drive revenues for organizations. We're not, most of us are probably running behind profitability, ROTE, etc. So our shareholders are, end of the day, looking at, what we do. So it's important that we balance it out. So I'm not all saying, so go gung-ho with people and pay and just sit and wait. So your profitability matters. But I think we can do a better job at it. Thank you very much.